Today I'm talking with Todd, CEO of Champify. And it turns out that we have quite a few things in common. We both were previously revenue leaders that turned into founders in this very busy RevTech space. And today we're having a conversation about what we believe is overhyped and underrated in this very busy RevTech industry. Enjoy.
But I think what I'm seeing is a lot of pressure from boards and CEOs to inject AI into every part of their business. Most people probably feeling pretty inadequate in terms of their knowledge to how to do that. You read on LinkedIn and everyone's an expert building some crazy workflow that probably doesn't work, right? But it's impossible for these leaders, in my opinion, not to feel like, shit, does everyone else have this figured out? And I don't. And I think these AI SDR, like the promise is incredible, right? Like you don't have to coach 24-year-olds and do tons of skill development and role play and babysitting, which is the reality to get that function to work really well. The premise sounds amazing. In practice, I have not talked to one company that says an AI SDR is making up a sizable chunk of my pipeline.
So Todd, the reason why we're jumping on here today is really that when we connected, we found out very quickly that we have a similar silly profile. Both of us were previously go-to-market leaders, making good money, having good lives. And then we both decided to stop that good life and become founders. So before we do anything else, Todd, why did you do that? Why are you doing this to yourself?
I'm really interested in your answer on this too. So here's mine. Couple of things, Tony. I was at a pretty hot, B2B SaaS venture backed company, grew really nicely. Like I saw a good run from almost $0. Like I started at around 300K or something and went to like 40 million. That company ended up getting close to about 80 and selling. And I think during that run, I learned a lot. I made all of the mistakes and I felt it was an awesome training ground. But when it sold, I also felt like I don't think I got enough of that for how valuable I was. Now, I'm sure everyone says that, but like I was the first 10 employees, hired a huge chunk of the most productive team, enabled a big chunk of that team, opened up new verticals, opened up international. So like all the value I provided, at the end of the day, I don't feel like I was compensated for that. And this wasn't like a knock on the founders or anything. It was just, I joined that company at 24, 25 years old. I wasn't that experienced when I started. And while they kept taking care of me along the way, I still feel like they were getting a discount for the talent as if they were to hire someone outside, right? So I think that was point one. I'll tell you point two that I think a lot of people don't think about. I had this interesting opportunity to work at a venture firm after Heat before starting Champify. And the logic, Tony, was, okay, I can learn venture from the other side. Like, how do they think about it? How does deal mechanics work? How do fund mechanics work? What are they looking for in founders? And what I started to see is I was like, okay, I think the early stage sales leader, which I like early stage, like I'm way better at the 0 to 20 million than like once you're just like in 8 forecast meetings a week. Like I didn't like that thing. And I think the early stage equity bet is a bad bet for most head of sales, first sales leader. Like, cool, you go get 1% equity, but like when you start to look at the probability of that working, how much dilution is going to happen, how much you're working relative to the founder, I just don't think it's a good trade, right? So I started saying, okay, unless there's some company that I'm like, cannot pass on, I'm better off trying to start something on my own. And it may be a smaller outcome, but I own a much bigger chunk of it. So that was my logic. Now, there was a lot of stuff I underestimated in that, but that was my logic.
So let me jump on that train. A lot of stuff that I've underestimated. I think a big reason for me was, I was part of two really successful journeys. Both of them ended in an exit. I was working extremely close with the founders and CEOs, basically, of the business, and this is the silly thing, right? I really only had those two main journeys. I had some work before I studied, or between my bachelor and my master, but really those were my journeys. So while I consciously knew, hey, this isn't normal, like in my belly, I was like, dude, I can do this myself. How difficult can this be? Come on. These guys are smart and good and driven, but seriously, I mean, come on, I can do this myself, right? So this was one part of the tangent. Basically, sometimes I call it, arrogance and ignorance. Basically, both things combined drove me in this direction. I'm hearing a little bit of that also from you.
Definitely.
Maybe coupled with a dash of greed in there as well, right? So same for me too. And I think then the other thing actually was, and this was pre-COVID. This was before everyone was doing remote work. I was looking around, and there was just, I really like here in Copenhagen, so I didn't want to move away. And I didn't even know remote work actually existed. So I was looking at the teams here in Copenhagen, and there was this one bracket that I basically came out of that were all in the post-exit 30-40 million range, that area. And then there were the teams that were like 15 people. There was just nothing in between. And then I was like, you know what? Actually, if my real only option is to join those 15 people, folks, how difficult would it be to just start from 0 instead of from 15, right? And then basically jumped into this with both feet. 2 friends of mine built the business, raised venture capital, made all the mistakes you can make. We totally made them. And yeah, that resulted into the first adventure that didn't really go as hoped. But I think that's how I stumbled into this. I want to say. But enough of our backgrounds here, and I think now it's pretty clear for people that we do actually have pretty similar backgrounds. Should we jump into the first couple of I want to say topics we want to knock on, right? So let's really kind of go into this. You and I, founders, aka we're doing most of the selling. I'm not, you guys have a bunch of people on the team. I'm sure you have a couple of more sellers than just yourself, but I'm sure you're still very much involved in all that stuff. So what is it that you're seeing across all of those conversations that are, let's just say, not necessarily the Champify problems that you're running into, but what are the things you're seeing that go-to-market leaders struggle with? Like, what are the real problems people run into? That is again and again, and you see that currently.
A couple of things. I think the first thing is there's like this bifurcation of companies right now. Like you're this hot, well-funded, very AI first, AI native company that's going really crazy. I think they have their own challenges. They're different, right? But the reality is 95 or more % of the companies are not that, right? So like most of the conversations are with these SaaS companies that may be growing nicely or growth is a little slower than they want, but they're good businesses. They have scale. Most of the conversations are with that camp. And I think what I'm seeing is a lot of pressure from boards and CEOs to inject AI into every part of their business. Most people probably feeling pretty inadequate in terms of their knowledge to how to do that. You read on LinkedIn and everyone's an expert building some crazy workflow that probably doesn't work, right? But it's impossible for these leaders, in my opinion, not to feel like, shit, does everyone else have this figured out and I don't? How do I make this thing work? So I think a lot of people are feeling some of that uneasiness or tension. I would say almost universally across the board, people are struggling to get into enough deals, right? And I think what is sometimes the unsaid truth is that people that have had good runs like me or you or even more experienced people, a lot of the mechanisms that they've used in the past just are not working at the same level. And some people are figuring out creatively how to adjust that, and a lot are not and struggling, right? So I think like that's kind of the undertone of a lot of what I'm seeing and feeling.
Wouldn't you think that, those two things are a little bit connected, right? I mean, I call it mass pipeline starvation that's going on right now. And at the same time, people are pressured to use AI for all kinds of tricks, and it's not working. And I would even say in some cases, AI is almost to blame for the starvation that's happening, because it basically has been killing some of those really dependable, reliable plays that you and I build our careers on, by the way. They're just not, I don't want to say they're not working. I think Outpost still works fine, by the way, but they're just not working like they used to.
That's it.
And and that's kind of that kills it basically, right? And then I feel AI is sometimes floated as this magic solution to solve it.
The savior.
And I call it the Messiah, actually.
Yeah.
AI is the messiah, you know. But it's just not happening. The deriving question from that is actually, um, does AI actually work to grow pipeline? You know, does that actually work? You know, this whole 11x and what is it, artisan, and that whole story. Do you believe that works, or does it work through like indirectly through different means? Or kind of, what's your thinking? This whole story that has been sold and is on LinkedIn is, oh, AI will grow your pipeline. I just don't see this happening. I've only seen AI diminishing my pipeline. That's what I've seen so far.
I'm in the same camp as you. So here's my take on it. I think these AI SDR, like the promise is incredible, right? Like you don't have to coach 24-year-olds and do tons of skill development and role play and babysitting, which is the reality to get that function to work really well. The premise sounds amazing. In practice, I have not talked to one company that says an AI SDR is making up a sizable chunk of my pipeline. I think there's two versions where it can be a nice additive bump, right? And I think that's in super SMB, huge TAM markets for more commodity oriented products, right? You're selling something in expense management or a loan product or some HR thing where your TAM is literally hundreds of thousands of companies. And you really just have to be touching enough of them and be on the radar, and you will get some from them. Again, most of the companies I talk to are not that. I think there's another camp where you have a massive PLG motion or you have a huge inbound flywheel, and putting some AI SDR on this like constant nurture thing can lead to results. The thing is, it's not like it's making up 20% of a company's pipeline, right? So it's like
No.
it's over promised on what it can do and under deliver.
I used to be in this like, oh no, human SDRs. Like, you know, there's just a difference between those two, and that's why human SDRs work. And I'm not in the camp anymore. You know, and it's not necessarily because AI got so much better. I'm not sure if it did meaningfully in that part, right? I think AI is way overpowered for basically every business right now, right? Kind of no one is really using this in the full extent. But I think, you know, I was trying to kind of figure this out for myself, right? Sure, human SDRs, they can still cold call. AI SDRs can't. But then again, human SDRs don't want to cold call, right? Kind of that's the other part of the reality. And I think what I'm kind of getting to is where hiring an additional SDR was basically cost prohibitive previously, actually adding the AI SDR makes sense. But let's just say you're in we're over here in Europe. Let's just say you're in a smaller market. Let's just say you're in Germany. You already have 20 SDRs on this thing. Would you actually want to hire additionally 10 SDRs into this region? Like, would you want to, right? If the answer used to be no, it doesn't make sense. We don't have more accounts and contacts and so forth to go for. Well, then adding an AI SDR that basically does that is not going to help you. Maybe it's going to help you like a quick spike, right? Because you basically, I don't know, the 10% accounts that you have left burn through in one day, for example. But otherwise, it doesn't work for you at all, right? It cannot drive more pipeline. What it actually can do, and I just haven't seen enough people being, I'm going to say, brave enough to execute it like this, is no, we actually are using the AI SDR to cut costs. Actually, that's what we're going to do. We're going to actually replace human SDRs with that, because then it suddenly it makes sense, right? Instead of having 20 people calling the German market, you maybe only have 5, and then you have one agent doing the other, replacing the other 15 or something like that, right? And that I can see, but it's like I haven't seen it.
I am seeing that trend a bit though, where like people starting to say that, okay, SDR, really good SDR who's sending super personalized emails actually isn't going to get that much of a lift at all compared to some more automated, whether it's AI or one human doing this, for 20 at the same time via a variety of tools. So maybe, hey, we'll have an AI SDR do it because they don't sleep, they work on the weekends, and we can get the messaging almost as good, if not better. And the reality is the results probably not going to change. And then how do
Yeah.
I divert this SDR attention to doing things that AI can't do, like getting really good on the
Yeah.
phones, right? So I think what's going to happen is you'll have more of this automated email going out by like a growth marketer or someone manning an AI SDR. And most SDR is spending almost all of their time on the phones in LinkedIn DMs.
Mm.
But like, it is going to hit a certain point where like, does that email really not work at all? And someone's just going to be like, do we actually have to keep doing this? Right? Like
Yeah.
we don't send much automated email. We've tried a variety of different ways. We don't use the sequencer tool anymore. And my previous company built $100 million in pipeline basically on the back of outreach. And
Yeah.
we don't do it at all because we had reps doing it, and just the amount of meetings that we get from email is so low, isn't worth their time. And then we had smart growth people using all these AI native tools, and still it doesn't really work to the level that I think justifies the time. So maybe we're bad at it, right? But like, I think that's happening, and a lot of people are afraid to say it.
And I think that's kind of the other thing that's probably out there but not really talked about is I just just wrote a piece on literally the growth messiah AI, kind of that maybe not working out. And I think if there is someone coming around the corner right now, it's at first I had kind of it's the evil AI messiah, but then I was like, can't do that. That's too negative. Let's call it the CFO AI messiah. That basically kind of is looking at the thing and it's going like, well, wait a minute. If AI can't help us grow, because it apparently can't, very limited, not as exciting as we all thought it would be. Maybe it can help us cut costs a lot. And I think that's actually, it's obviously kind of a negative story, and it always leads to this like, oh, AI is coming for my job and blah blah. I think that's totally happening, and I actually think that while the boards, as you mentioned, are pushing like, hey, you need to deploy AI, my friend, and then the CEO is like, okay, dear CRO, please use AI to drive me more pipeline. That same CEO has the same conversation with the CFO, but instead of pipeline, they just like, you need to drive down costs with this thing, right? And what's the CFO going to do? He's like looking at the P&L and it's like, oh wow, sales and marketing. That seems like a really big big expense here for us. Isn't there something we could be doing about this? And I think that part is gonna, I don't know, it's gonna pick up more pace in the next year, I think.
I agree with that. I think like, look, these things are going to keep getting better. The tech is going to keep getting better. We're going to collectively get better at training and tweaking them. Like I follow Jason Lemkin talking a lot about
Yes.
how much
Yeah.
time he's spending on his AI. We're not doing that yet. Maybe we should be, right? Like I'm really eager to see that. And you can make arguments. SaaStr is an easier sell. It's kind of a one, it's basically a sponsorship. He knows who the target is, but like it has to get better and it's going to get cheaper, right? So like those CFOs, I think, are going to be pressured to do a lot of that.
Let's talk more about Jason, because I also have been, following that specific thread of his like lately, because it's really, really interesting, right? Kind of yet this whole thing about Replit and him vibe coding like crazy. I think that was interesting. But then the other thing is he's now talking a lot about how how awesome, but also incredibly time consuming it is to set up those agents, right? And he's talking about like an SDR kind of thing, content, whatever, like support. I don't actually know. What is it that, in your opinion, what is the learning there actually? What is it everyone else is getting wrong around AI? What is it that Jason is seemingly starting to figure out here?
Yeah, I think there's two parts. So on the like vibe coding thing, I don't know about you. I've spent multiple weekends trying to build stuff, different things, and like it seems fun, but like output from it, right? And I'm not the most technical person, or maybe I have bad ideas, but I think I'm way more common than the one person raving about some new productivity thing they built.
Yeah.
On the second front, I think as a VC, you have to be kind of this futurist mindset. You want to be the first one using different tools. And in his mind, he's like, okay, I can invest a ton of time in trying to get this thing to work. It's overall going to get better and better. He's creating amazing content. Me and you, without even talking
Mm.
about this before, are both reading and following all of it.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I would love for him to be like, here's what our AI SDR did. Here's how it compared to the human, right? Here's how it's changing over time. I haven't seen much of that. But based on the way he talks, it seems like it is starting to work. I'm not seeing that from most companies I'm talking to.
And I think that goes a little bit into the, he's this massive email database, and I'm sure the SDR can work through this. And, this is, I think that's an
He has a
example
unique
where it was
advantage there,
just,
right? I think that's really
no, but
important to
it's,
call out.
so exactly. But also, I think it was cost prohibitive for him previously to install 10 SDRs that do that stuff because he doesn't have venture capital, right? He is a venture capitalist himself, right? Kind of, this is a profitable business that he's running with SaaS.
Yeah, it's not a SaaS business either.
No, exactly, right? So, but I think what I really think is interesting is people are totally underestimating the amount of work that they need to put in for those AI systems, whatever they are, to actually work. Like, I think that's a major dime that's dropping when I read that stuff, and I'm sure other people are kind of having the same experience. It's like, so I actually shouldn't be blaming the vendor and the model. I actually should be blaming me instead. So I think there's a little bit of that happening, I think, for people, right? And I think that's, I think that's one piece, and maybe kind of that's going over into to almost the next question I had, and maybe I shut up for this. But what is it you see? People are doing wrong. Kind of, what are mistakes? What is overhyped? Kind of, what were you thinking about that in terms of problems that we're seeing right now in order to basically address the main problem, which is pipeline starvation?
I feel really strongly about this question because, again, if you talk to people and that, like, for example, Clay, right? Like, super powerful tool. There's this blank canvas of all of stuff you can do. But a conversation I seem to be having a lot is you don't get points for like building complex campaigns, right? You don't get points for stitching together a bunch of previously impossible to stitch together data sets. You get points for meetings that convert into pipeline and revenue, right? And I think there's been a little bit of this obsession on look at what I can do and a lot less on here's what it's driving, right? And, I think it's all kind of predicated on a bet that it's going to keep getting better and the results will come. But I think if you polled 100 people, 99% would say the results haven't really come yet.
I also would say, and this is kudos to Clay, which are basically able to cut through the attention. Like, I think that's the biggie that everyone is basically failing at, and just a few are able to do it. But if you talk to any random CRO right now, and you bring up Clay, they either say, no, we have that, yeah, or no, oh, we totally need Clay. And then you say, what does Clay do? And they just don't actually have a clue. It's like, well, it's something with like data and enrichment, but that's it, right? And I think that's a lot of the drive that they're getting. And then I think you put it best, like the other day when we talked about this. It's like a lot of people that just love solving puzzles fall in love with this tool, right? Because it basically kind of does that for them. And the question is like, yes, the guy that loves to solve puzzles in, random Joe medium-sized business in the US, that's cool. But what about the enterprise businesses that, don't have these people or don't want to have these people or kind of have different measurements of what success looks like? Is that also going to work there, right? And to a degree, I think the whole Clay thing, albeit lots of people are super fans on this show, I'm sure about that. But it's starting to drift a little bit into the overhyped bucket for me, actually. But I don't know. I don't want to speak poorly about those folks.
I mean, look, I think they're going to be a case study in absolute best marketing and positioning. Like, it's unbelievable how they've gone about it. I also know Kareem and Varun. They're very, very smart. So, like, to get a lot of this buzz and early adoption and then a really, really good eng team, like, I think they have a huge opportunity to do a lot of interesting things. But I do think to date, it's a lot of like, they've created this kind of enigma of like, someone described it best to me the other day. If Toni, if someone's using your company or Champify or insert 10 other, not really you, but ours world of you pay Champify to get pipeline, right? At the end of the day, that's what it is. And if we don't deliver pipeline, we get fired at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
If Clay doesn't deliver pipeline, someone says, the person operating Clay isn't smart enough. We didn't quite figure that out. And they've created that and it's unbelievable, right? Now, again, I think like they have a really smart team and they're going to capitalize on. I don't know their internal stuff, so maybe like I'm just hearing from people that can't quite figure it out. But like that positioning, however that happened, is incredible.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think Clay is solving one of the biggest issues that's holding back this whole AI boom that maybe, it hopefully soon will reach the P&L. But it's really it's really your messy data. It's like all of this data stuff, like the boring things. At least that's my perception. And when I talk to folks, I hear this all the time. The boring things are what's holding people back. It's like, oh, my data is messy. We don't have a clean process for the AI to follow or to learn from. Oh, and we actually didn't document much of how we pitch, whom, and why, and it's really all of these old ways of onboarding a human. They just don't work the same way with onboarding an AI, for example, right? And it's kind of, I think those are like these boring things are the main pieces holding people back from trying to jump on this automation train. At least that's kind of my perception, actually.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, like, whether it's Clay or insert other players, like when you were coming up as the CRO or me as well, like finding a good list of people, getting data together, getting contact information, be able to execute, it was really hard, right? And like making that thing easy is a huge value prop, and every company needs it. Even if you're not doing any outbound, you're doing some marketing stuff, you're doing some targeting stuff, right? So it's like it's a massive problem.
Sometimes I think about what we're trying to achieve in the go-to-market. It really suffers under this extreme pressure for the short term, right? Kind of let's say kind of the other way around. In politics, right? You give those folks 4 years, 5 years, depending on which role in which country, to turn things around and do the right thing. And even they're saying like, hey guys, 4 years is pretty short. Like for a country, 4 years is not much. I feel in go-to-market, it's 3 months. Like you have 3 months. If a bet doesn't work out in 3 months, there's gonna be an election. And you might not get reelected, my friend. It's like, isn't this like one of those things that just, that's perpetuating this messy state of things where everyone is just looking for new shiny things, throwing them at the problem. Oops, didn't work. But everyone is trying to just, get something done within like a super short amount of time. I mean, isn't some of that short-termism, so to speak, at the heart of it?
I think definitely. I think there's even something deeper there, which is like, we're in a really, I've been doing this tech stuff for like 14 years, right? Like, I feel like, and I heard Jason Lemkin, not to keep talking about him, say this on a podcast. He's like, look, it used to be you get to 10 million in ARR. If you had strong net retention, 100 was very possible, right? You had to do the right things, but it was kind of inevitable almost, right? Now I see a lot of companies between 30, 50, 70, 100 that like, that growth is not guaranteed anymore, right? You're getting flanked on all ends by some YCAI first startup that's cracked out and doing insanely fast on the product side. And you can fall out of product market fit way quicker than it ever felt like in my career doing this. And then who gets blamed is the CRO, because short term, the pipeline machine isn't working. And I think there's a lot of CEOs and founders that don't want to accept it's a much bigger problem, but it's very easy to point to the sales leader or the go-to-market leader and say, hey, this is on you.
I mean, I think there's some deeper truth actually in the whole, well, you reached 10 million, you still haven't gotten anywhere, right? Kind of there's this whole thing now about like, no. Remember this triple, double. That's not quadruple, triple. There's like, okay, great, thank you. I'll put this into your anxiety box. But then the other thing is, right, you have this Clary Salesloft thing, basically Clary Salesloft drift thing, that Franken suite that emerged there. That I think, I'm not sure who it was, but basically people are calling it now, it's a defeat. It's basically them saying, you know what? Doesn't work out. We spent $1 billion in venture capital in order to get to wherever we are. And I'm not even sure if they're like they're probably like 200-300 million in the combined entity, but they have like terrible growth numbers, they have terrible net retention numbers, they have terrible everything numbers, right? And just throwing all of these things together is probably not going to result in a better product. Like, I think that's going to be difficult. It's probably not going to result in a healthier company. The only thing it results in is nicer looking spreadsheets with maybe a zero more here and there, and maybe some, synergies, cost synergies. Again, we're back to cost, I guess. But that, it seems very much like a financially engineered thing rather than a this makes total sense for our customers and prospects.
I've been thinking a lot about this. So I listen to if you ever listen to Bill Gurley has a podcast called
No.
BG2, and these like
Mm.
really finance brains that are way smarter than me and way more experienced. But he was talking about what happens to a lot of these zombie unicorns,
Mm.
right? Which are like, you've raised way too much money. It's not a bad company. You're either profitable or very close to it, but the growth is nowhere near the bar for what it is to be an IPO business. So I don't think it's really a defeat. I think it's just accepting the reality. And if you're one of those companies, you either need to say, okay, I can keep trying to chug along, make a bunch of different AI bets. Hopefully we can speed up all of this growth. Or you need to say, what's the alternative, which is probably some merger, M&A, combining, accepting way shittier liquidation preferences. You're not going to make the money that you thought. But I think it's a lot better than the alternative. And if you look at, the CEO, Clary, he's been at it for a long time, right? So like, if you don't believe that some new M&A you can do of taking a smaller company, which they've tried, or a big bet on some new product area is going to really accelerate, I think you're going to have to do this, right? There's already been a ton of M&A in our space, even at the smaller scale, because I have to believe that you're going to get more efficiency gains of not only like, hey, you combine two companies, you have less G&A and duplicative headcount, but also you're fighting one less competitor in every deal cycle, which should help velocity, should help the pricing pressure you were seeing, right? Because there's just a lot of categories where people have been duking it out for years. So I think this has to happen.
What are trends that you think are accelerating currently in this space, right? And this might both be problems that are worsening or solutions that are getting traction, or whatever it might be. But what do you think is picking up pace and is landing in more and more people's heads and feel like either they need to act on it or they're behind?
I think the trend that's like most obvious that I'm seeing is like, I think some of these cold call power dialer solutions are really having a moment where it used to be
Mm.
kind of like, yeah, we maybe do that, or we talk about taking dialing and a cold call culture serious. And now people are really leaning into that thing with, folks like Orem and some of the competitors there.
Mm.
And it's just like, again, you have a sales team, you're the CRO, you're looking across your team and saying, what's the best expected value I can get for $1, an hour of work of someone on my team? And
Yeah.
while connect rates may be going down, it's probably better than the alternative. That's how we see it internally, right? So I think they're having a moment. Um, I'd say that's the one trend or thing that I'm seeing that most people are like really talking about across the board.
I think it's an interesting one. So the European perspective on this, like, oh, it's not allowed, it's verboten here. But basically, power dialers, for everyone who doesn't know this, you're but calling 10 people at the same time, and then the first one that picks up, that's the person that then connects to the rep, right? Basically, what used to be 10 dials in a sequence is now 10 dials in parallel, and obviously you're gonna have you're gonna have more conversations, basically, kind of doing this stuff, right? And I think the whole idea about it is really okay. Emails and LinkedIn and all of that stuff can now be sent automatically by those AI SDRs. So what's left to do for humans? and it's calling, right? I mean, so I chatted with someone about this. I'm not 1,000% sure actually, but robocalling in the US, that is still also not allowed, right? Kind of,
Correct.
you're not allowed to.
Outbound
Yeah,
calling,
exactly.
correct.
Yeah. And this is not just this is not allowed in state of New York or state of California. This is broadly speaking not allowed anywhere, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So and then basically kind of those power dials, that's the way to do it, right? That you have a human being, but you reach a bunch of more people at the same time, right?
Yeah, I would say the other thing that I'm seeing is also people really leaning into events and saying, how can I get really good at this thing? And when I say events, I think that also means trade shows and big sponsors, but also getting really good at kind of owned regional events, right? So like, hey, yeah, maybe we're only going to get 12, 15, 20 people there. But again, it's better than the alternative. So let's get really good at that thing. I think people want to get in person. They want to have some human connection. People are a little bit fatigued with all of the digital nature of communication. So that's a common trend I'm hearing. It's like, hey, I talked to a big company yesterday. They're like, we're doing 500 events this year, like
Okay.
500 events, right? Now that's a big team and a big investment. But again, I think it's probably better than the alternatives.
So I was just about to ask, like everyone is talking about in person because yeah, that makes sense now. But are people really doing? Is this really actually happening? And like when you say this company does 500 events, I always kind of retracted my question. But so far I've been hearing a lot of people talking about it. I haven't seen anyone like, outside of I don't know, Pavilion or communities like that you can jump on. But I see people also struggle really committing to this events thing, right? Because it doesn't bring the immediate, okay, I closed this last call and here's an opportunity now, and now we're closing a deal. It doesn't have that, right? So it always feels like a risky bet. So that's what I see where people then suddenly hesitate, right? And I'm not sure if people are really fully jumping on this or if this is more like because of this AI thing, this probably should make sense now.
I'm seeing companies take it really seriously, and they're partnering field marketers with specific regions for reps. And they're saying, all right, we're going to go do this once a month, throw an event, get 20 people there. And you have to be really creative to say, how do I get someone to show up? Or hopefully your deal size justifies enough to kind of pay for something interesting to get people to come. But there's companies taking it really seriously, and I think it's smart. Tony, there's one other trend I'm seeing. I'm curious what you have either both at the time at Growblocks and now at Additive is people have a problem. For us, it's like, hey, I'm trying to fix pipeline. I'm trying to get more output per rep. And in my career selling beforehand, it was like, okay, I want to fix this problem. I'm looking at this category of vendors. I'm going to pick one based on required capabilities and sales cycle and demos or trials or whatever that is. Whereas now I feel like people are starting to look at variety of different categories and flavors of tooling to fix a problem. And I think it's a challenge for reps and deal cycles, because basically what I'm saying is I think the required capabilities of a lot of these buyers are a lot more amorphous, right? And it's like, I have a problem I want to fix. I don't even know how I'm going to tackle that. I'm wondering if
Yeah.
you felt that or were seeing that or how you think about it, because I don't think we're alone.
I think the problem actually stems from, and I'm seeing this in Additive too, to a degree, right? Because we're like this AI native company. AI enables you to solve a bunch of problems, and suddenly you can claim you play in all of those different categories that were previously extremely separate, and you couldn't possibly solve all of these things. But I think with AI, suddenly, yeah, sure. I mean, I can run a forecast for you. You can also clean your data, and I also can listen to a transcript for you, right? There's so many things suddenly that feel like they're collapsing a little bit. And I think what's happening is buyers are getting increasingly so confused. Like previously, you had this wonderful, there's a market map, and then there's a category, and then I go into the category, and who's winning the category. Now more and more smelling like, oh, wait a minute, I don't think you can trust that chessboard approach anymore. Suddenly you need to look at what's the meta play on top, right? And then I think even more so confusing is Sam Altman goes on stage, announces something new, and then not only every founder, but also every buyer is like, oh geez, is that maybe going to be included in my OpenAI subscription in 6 months? do I need a tool for this, a login for 12 months? Or is that going to be just an add-on like with Anthropic tomorrow? And I think that's what's just scaring buyers to a degree, I think, right? And I think those two things together don't only make it harder for for sellers, I think they also make it harder for buyers.
I think so too. I think so too. but I just don't see how that's going to get materially easier or better anytime soon.
No, me neither. I
Right?
think
Like,
no, I don't think so. And then there's always like this, oh, I don't know how that's gonna get solved. And then someone just yells AI. And it's like, I'm not sure if that's actually gonna be the solution to that either, you know? I think at the end of the day, there will be a surge of new tools now. There just will be, right? And I think the barrier to entry is lowered. Even I'm using Cursor for the website, not for anything else, just for the website. And I can just see how much easier it is for people. You know, you don't need to raise 5 million. You don't even need to raise a million. Actually, you can just get going from zero basically. So what's going to happen is you have a lot more entrants. A lot, you know, the market map is going to look even more confusing. And then trying to navigate that as a buyer is just going to be incredibly difficult, right? And I think either what's going to happen is you have like really smart AI that just scrolls through everything and kind of figures this out for you. I don't know. Or you're going to buy the folks you know, meaning someone broke through the noise, were able to sell you a story of, hey, like that's really powerful for you, and then just going to go with it, right? I think some of the laziness and trust and default to the safe option, I think it's gonna rear its head again. But also at the same time, I think this whole consolidation play that we were like sold with like Gong and Clary and Sales Software and Outreach, I don't think that's so pronounced anymore. I don't, I feel there's a little bit of a waning of Gong. Like people say like, it's pretty expensive actually. And I use it for call recording. I don't need the forecasting thing. I don't need that stuff. And there's a little bit of a fracturing that's happening again of people like, you know what, let's go best of breed. Let's do that again. All of these, I'm not sure what the net effect is of this, but I'm seeing all of these things happening.
Tony, I wanted to ask you something because I get a lot of DMs or people in my network saying, I've done the go to market leader thing. Maybe I have a background like you or I did. And they're saying, I've always flirted with wanting to start this company. What advice do you have for those people? Or how do you answer that question when people are like, hey, should I do what you did? Should I take a crack at this thing? What advice do you have, or like some maybe learnings that are valuable for that flavor of person?
I think if you sit down and try and do like a should I do it, should I not kind of tally, you should not do it. And it's a little bit, and this is, let's see what people think about this. By the way, if you sit down and do a tally on should I get kids or not, you will land at you shouldn't do it. Like, if you go all the way to the end, it's like, you know what, it's actually a terrible idea. But the thing is, a lot of people have kids, by choice, and a lot of people go out and build a company. And I think the reason for that is not that you're super convinced you're gonna make necessarily more cash. I think what I'm seeing more and more is people enjoy building stuff. Building a company is just like building a table or being a carpenter or something. Like you are building something. I think that gives you a different level of joy. I think the freedom and the lottery ticket, it's super alluring. I think once people start on the track, what they will see is how extremely difficult this is, how extremely joyless this is, how how really good this monthly 10 20K dollar salary looks like from that vantage point suddenly. So really at the end of the day, you just need to choose what you want to miss. You want to miss freedom, like in a I can do what I want kind of sense, or do you want to miss freedom in a I can buy whatever I want kind of sense? You just need to decide. And the last thing I will say on this topic is go do it. Like this was a big thing for me. I was a go-to-market leader. I did some, finance work before. I was kind of in a venture capital fund before. I did some of the, financing for, at least two of those companies. Together with the CEO, right? I didn't do that, but kind of saw it up close. I felt I had all the skills and the network available to do it, so I would have felt shitty not to try, right? Kind of, it was almost like a FOMO situation, basically. And if you have that, you should totally do it, and do it as early as you can. Don't do it when you have kids. Like the risk just goes up so much because you have to bring home cash, and it's much easier to live on what I sometimes call ramen profitability, when you're by yourself or with a spouse than when you have family, right? Kind of your fixed expense with a family just 5 axis, like from one day to the next. So do it as soon as you can rather than wait. You know, I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier, right? But I mean, what's your thinking on that question?
I think there's a couple things I underestimated. And I'll tell you a story, Tony. Like, my co-founder and I, we were talking about Champify for a while. He was eventually like, "Hey, I'm gonna go do this," and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna invest and I'm gonna help you out a little bit." And he was trying to say, "No, we should be doing this together." And I first said no, and then like a couple months later, he was eating at me, and I was like, I really think that's the thing I should be doing. I think there's two things I underestimated. One, just how all encompassing and consuming it is. Like
Mm,
there's so many times I'm eating dinner with my wife and she's talking. I'm like, I'm not listening to one word you're saying. Like it's
yeah,
so always on. I think the other thing is just like if you're in a company, you're leading the sales org, like you have a bad day or a low productive week, like your reps are selling, marketing people are doing something. So like stuff is happening at the early stage. If you don't do anything, literally nothing happens, right? Like just every single day you have to be creating and pushing something forward. I think I underestimated that. And then, but I think I thought about it ultimately the same way you did, which is like, it's all hard. What is the hard you want to pick? And then
mm,
what are you going to feel better about missing or not doing, right? Like I spent this year in the venture thing and it was a well-paid job. It was interesting, the work I was doing, but part of me felt like, I'm on the sideline, right? Like I'm
yeah.
not really, really in the game. And to me, that felt worth the trade-offs of making a lot less money,
Yeah.
more of a lottery ticket bet, my wife hating me sometimes, right? Like,
One advice I can give, and I think it's more pertinent now than it used to be like 5 years ago. Try not raise venture capital. I think that it's been written into our brains that the way you build a business is you get a pre-seed round and then you hire some people and then you build a business. Um, you don't have to do it like this. Actually, in fact, for most of human life, that's not how you did it. You just built an actual, what we now in this regard call a lifestyle business or a profitable business. That's how businesses used to get built. You started working and you had some customers and it worked out. Um, and I think with the extremely low financial footprint right now to get a product out, there are other paths to this, right? And I'm not saying it's a luxurious role. I think it's also not super luxurious even when you raise capital. But I gotta say, I do sleep a lot better. I sleep a lot better now than working, with a lot of money on the bank account. And that in itself also gives you some joy and energy to keep building and pursuing this and not questioning yourself all the time. And so I think that's worthwhile to consider for folks.
why do you think that is?
The expectation, the pressure is just insane, right? So
But
I mean,
is that
it's
even your board and investors, or is that just self?
no, it's I mean, sure, it's also there, right? It's not. I'm terribly sorry for my investors having lost their money, and then some of them I knew personally before, and I'm really sorry that they did lose their money. But really, my motivation was for myself to achieve that, right? Kind of the other folks were just with me for the ride, so to speak. Um, and the thing is, right, you go out on fundraise and you tell a story and you believe that story even. It's like, oh, this is going to be difficult, but you obviously do believe the story, right? I think doing anything else, that's shitty. That's shit, taking money from someone and actually not believing what you're saying, that's kind of a shitty thing. But then you get caught up in obviously your own belief and how difficult it is to achieve that, right? Kind of if you raise, we raised 8 million euros. I think in the end we're like 30 million posts or something like this. You need to have an actual business that grows into those shoes, and not only grows into 30 million. Really, the way the math works is you need to grow at least into 90 million. Like that's how it is, my friend, right? And it's like, in order to get to 90 million, and especially when you then do a Series A, Series B, the math starts to be less magical, right? When you do seed or pre-seed, whatever multiple, like 50, it doesn't actually, maybe it's infinite multiple because you don't even have revenue, right? Kind of all of that is just a game in the seed space. In the Series A, Series B space, suddenly it's, oh no, wait a minute, 15x is pretty rich, actually. It's pretty rich. And then when you think about it, oh my God, okay, wait, 15x is rich. So in order to hit 1 million in valuation, to be tripling on my last round, I actually need to get to like, 6, 7, 8 million. When is that gonna happen? And then you look at your bank account, you're running a spreadsheet, and you realize, oh, that needs to happen in the next 18 months. Or, whatever, like, something more, realistic than that. And then you have all those people that you hired and you sold them the same story, right? And I think all of that, the walls start closing in at some point. And that's really just not fucking fun, And then obviously from there you have let's take the profitability path and let's try and kind of build this into a profitable business, which could be kind of great for you and everyone around you, but definitely not your board. They're like, I'm feeling like I'm wasting my time here now, right? Or you don't get that direction, and kind of we didn't get to that point, so we're kind of shutting doors here. But I think that combination of pressures, that's harder to sleep at night with, I feel.
I think the problem is a lot of people, if you raise the bigger round, it's hard not to get kind of pressured into spending it a lot faster when you're not really even sure how to spend it. But you're like, okay,
Yeah.
smart people that have seen this are telling me to do that, right? And I think that takes a certain level of discipline, or avoiding peer pressure almost.
No, for sure. And it's kind of, to a degree, that's also the business that those VCs are in, right? They want to have you spend that money. Anyway, I still think like it's up to you as a CEO. Come on, so we shouldn't be crying about that stuff. It's like, we're spending that cash, we're responsible.
For sure.
And I think that's the only thing I think that I feel different about now. And obviously and this is, we're going way off topic here, and let's kind of see how much we're kind of cutting out and leaving in. We're usually keeping it in, by the way. It's like we talked about Salesloft and Drift and Clary and so forth, right? And I think you're absolutely right. Are those now shit companies? Like, they're probably like 250 million in ARR, maybe more. I don't know. Are they shit businesses, 250 million ARR, and probably profitable to a degree or burning very little? No, they're actually pretty good business. They're, probably better businesses than most on the planet. We just compare them to they will never live up to their investor expectations, which they won't. Like, that money is lost, right? That's why we're calling it the Walking Dead, or whatever. But actually, it doesn't mean that business now needs to disappear because it's not fulfilling investor expectations. It's still, growing GDP. It's still, paying people salaries. It's still enabling people to, buy their home and get kids, and like, it's still doing a lot of, and obviously their customers are benefiting from this also a lot, right? So it's like, it's actually good businesses. We're just with a very cynical approach judging that to a degree, right? And I, coming from that, building a business without the VC thing, really going in that direction, just wanting to build a good business. I think that's not a bad thing. And I think actually, LinkedIn and Twitter should change their stance a little bit on this. Instead of like always, what, you bootstrapped, or it's because you couldn't get VC funding. That's why, right? Having just a little bit, a different approach to this thing. And let's see when that comes back. But there's some, famous stories now. But let's see where this goes. I think we're also up on time here, Todd. Do you have like a last kind of closing statement here?
Yeah, Tony, I appreciate talking through this with you. I think there's probably a lot of your listeners that are in, CRO, VP sales role, go-to-market leadership roles. I think it's interesting just hear your and I perspective of at least talking to tons of people, right?
Yeah.
I think the learning, and I talk to you is like, there's a lot changing. And I think like, yes, that makes things hard, but it does also, like, if this podcast came across as negative, it does present a lot of opportunity, right? Like, it's easier than ever to start a company. It's easier than ever to get to some meaningful revenue with a small amount of team. So like, it is a really exciting time. And I'd encourage people that are hearing our journeys and wanting to make the jump, I would say do it too, because like, regardless of how things may shake out financially, and a lot of that is to be written, there's just so much learning and fun. And I feel like regardless what I do next, there's I'll be much better at it.
Yeah. Todd, thanks for summing it up. I couldn't have done it better myself. Thanks a bunch for the conversation. Thanks everyone else for listening, and see you next week. Cheers.
Thanks, Tony.
Next week, I'm talking to Antoine, CEO at Qobra. We talk about the terrible details of designing comp plans for usage-based or outcome-based models, which I know many of you suffer from, and how you can make sure to piss off your best sales reps really fast. If you don't want to miss it, hit subscribe and see you next week.
Sales compensation is a key motivation driver for sales reps. You want to design a sales compensation program that is really gonna drive motivation, and you want them to understand it. And the reality was, when you're running comp in spreadsheets, the reps, they've got high chances that they don't understand well enough the comp plan. Instead of driving motivation, you're creating frustration. When you're a sales rep, money matters a lot. Don't mess with money and pay them super well, because otherwise, every time they're leaving, it's a hell lot of lost revenue.